everybody, thanks for taking the time to listen to the Real Talk podcast. We hope that these discussions will inform and inspire you to engage in your own Real Talk. Today's episode is brought to you by our official sponsor, Tri-Van, builders of custom trucks, trailers, and enclosure buildings tailored to your needs. Be sure to check them out at www.trivan.com. A big thanks to them for making these conversations possible. Now, on to the episode. Hey everybody, welcome to Real Talk Podcast. I believe by the time this comes out, this will be episode 50. So that's pretty cool. Nice little milestone there.
Over the hill.
Over the hill. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully we make it to 100. No, we will for sure. But today we are honored to be joined by a couple special guests. Jake Valk.
They're always special guests.
I mean, they are. But today
everybody's special.
Extra special, man. Extra special.
This would be the number 50.
Number 50.
Let's go.
You don't get that every day.
That's it.
So we got Jake Valk here and John-Michael Bout. And they are two documentary filmmakers. Very professional. And so I'll throw it over to you guys. You can explain who you are, what your background is, and then what this new documentary you guys are working on. So maybe go ahead, Jake, if you want.
Cool. Yeah. So I grew up around here. I was a member of Vineland Free Reformed Church for like 17, 18 years, something like that. And yeah, I went to school at Mohawk College for advertising, worked in the advertising industry for a bit. And then I just realized working in advertising, it's just a really soulless place. There's very little purpose. And so a bunch of different steps kind of left that. But some of the skills I picked up in advertising was doing film stuff. I've kind of put into some situations and some other jobs where I just got to do some film work, which I really, really loved. So that just kind of became a bit of a regular thing. Yeah. That kind of, there's really no way to explain it. Sometimes you just kind of look back and go, all right, I've been doing this for a while, I guess. Interesting, right? Yeah. And so I've had some really cool opportunities to work in film. And yeah, and so John-Michael and I filmed another documentary a couple years ago, 3 years ago now.
Yep.
That was really fun. And we just kind of developed a love for the craft of putting together like a story in film and really thinking through how are you going to carry people through a journey from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And then, but I decided I wanted to go to seminary. So I ended up at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, and I've been there for a year. And I get to spend my summers back here in Canada, which is awesome. So that's where I'm at right now.
Cool. Wonderful.
And yeah, for myself, also grew up in the area, Beamsville, good Christian family home. I went to Emmanuel for over a decade. I don't remember how long. Now I go to Living Hope OPC also in Beamsville.
Okay.
Yeah. And I got my undergrad in classics and I'm going to same seminary, Southern Seminary.
Wonderful.
So yeah, pretty pumped.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. You just bought a house down there, you were saying?
Yeah, just got a house there. Super exciting. Hopefully all the paperwork goes through.
Yeah.
It's incredible. They ask for every document of your life.
I would believe that. Yeah.
And more.
Tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And you're an outsider, so.
I know. Well, that's actually part of it. Being a Canadian citizen going into a different country. So
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, so what's this, what the film that you're working on?
Do you want to tell your story, kind of your personal story with it? And then I'll pick up and then we can talk about Tim Challies and how that all connects.
Yeah. The lead up is what kind of builds for this. So yeah, I just did like kind of the Coles Notes positive version of my life. And just to share my story, this film that we're doing, it's on pornography, which the title will be showing already. But I was caught in pornography for nearly a decade. And that even growing up in a really great Christian home where both my parents were very intentional in having conversations with me and the rest of my siblings, which is actually really rare. So told me what pornography was at an early age. Said like, we're open to having conversations about this. And I think did a really great job. Even still with that, when I first got a phone, it's just stumbled across it the first time and came across some references in a book. I was curious. And for myself, it started off at a very young age, just softcore pornography. And that immediately got paired with masturbation for me as well. So just kind of like as soon as puberty hit, that was for me when it started to get connected. And those two things very much fused together. Mm-hmm. So as I grew up, that pattern of secrecy, knowing in like just with intuition that it was wrong, and obviously people talking about it, and yet enjoying it and being a little bit afraid of what bringing that, to other people would look like. And I don't even remember having a clear, like, oh, I'm going to hide this from my parents. And like, I know this is wrong, but I'm going to still do this. It was not intentional in that kind of way. And yet the addiction just kept growing and growing to the point where, every single day with masturbation, sometimes multiple times a day. And all of this for me fed, frustration with family, fighting with parents and siblings, all being coming from a place of me feeling guilty and being angry at the people around me because I felt like of the condemnation of people there, which is literally just my own guilty conscience. And kind of rewinding again, all of this at the same time, growing up in a really, good Christian family, where, siblings and cousins were the ones leading youth groups, being the people who are intentional with their Christianity, which was a huge blessing to be in a family like that, and still is. But for me, I started to get really good at living the good front and another life on the other side. So juggling two identities that, I guess, merging together made for an angry person afterwards. So I got really good at living that double lifestyle all the way till, for nearly a decade till I was 16 or 17. I think I was 17. Anyways, just a lot of stuff going on in my life at that point. Kind of just cycling down, moving slowly away from Christianity. Not in any obvious way, but just kind of struggling with my faith. And for me, it was when I came into contact with some Christian dudes, young Christian guys that imaged what it was like to be quote unquote cool and a passionate Christian, someone who truly loved the Lord at the same time. And I just distinctly remember sitting down with my cousin, and he had just come back from a men's conference. Trying to remember the name of it. Anyways, he came back from a conference and was just kind of sharing how God was working in his life. And it was a purity conference. And I distinctly remember the Holy Spirit convicting me and the thought going in my head, if you don't open up about this now, you never will. And you're going to remain a hypocrite like this for the rest of your life. It's like a very distinct memory for me. And by God's grace, I opened up in the attic of my parents' garage with two friends. And for the first time, properly, voluntarily shared and confessed my sin of watching pornography and masturbation and that addiction. And that was, I guess, the point that I could truly start saying, I think I love the Lord. So for me, was I saved before? Yeah, I think I was. But where my walk with the Lord began the upward trajectory was when I began to kill, hate, and bring into the light my addiction to pornography and masturbation. So for me, just kind of fast forwarding the healing process for myself, being walked alongside with these other guys, that was amazing. I eventually joined an accountability group in Burlington. That split off into Niagara. And then that eventually motivated me, pushed me to take life renewal.
Nice.
And life renewal was amazing. God just gave me a lot of healing through that. And it's a lengthy program, but I really, really recommend everybody to go take that if you have the time. And if you can, even if you don't have some quote unquote big addiction or sin or something that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
So through that, God gave me a ton of healing, but I want to be clear, not perfect healing either. But anyways, out of that, I continued in this accountability group and just being walked alongside by other people, doing that for other guys. And God has given me freedom from pornography now, which is amazing. And that's, I guess, for me, what has motivated and led me and Jake to want to create a resource on this.
Yeah.
And kind of specifically pulling back, books were helpful for me, like very helpful. We brought some here. Finally Free by Heath Lambert in particular was really good. But kind of teeing up for you, Jake, not everybody's a reader. In fact, most people
people
I know are not readers.
Hence the podcast. Yeah.
Hence
Yeah,
podcasts,
right.
hence videos.
Yeah.
Maybe take it away.
Yeah. So, my story is really similar in a lot of ways, distinct in one particular way. Also, my parents talked to me a lot about pornography. My mom, especially from really, really young, talked to me a lot about it. And I credit her, and thank God, with just talking about it so early that I never watched hardcore pornography or pornography proper, if you will. And I'm very grateful for that. So I was one of the incredibly few people that I know who didn't spend time watching pornography. But I was completely addicted to masturbation for years and years and years and years of being a teenager. And so for me, I didn't quite need the images on the screen, but still, Jesus is really clear about it. Lust is in your mind. And so I could act out fantasies in my mind that were completely contrary to what, God calls us to. But I did that while holding the Pharisee card of being like, yeah, but I don't watch pornography, right? So I could lead that really pharisaical double life of having the moral high ground and yet still just walking in absolute sin. And so through a series of good friends, another different conference that, called out sin really hard. So I became completely convicted that this is just wrong. I can't do this. And so, God freed me of that sin, of that addiction as well, which I'm so grateful for. But yeah, kind of same thing. So many great books were massive, like Finally Free, again, in particular, probably talk about that book a lot. That reading that book was so pivotal, just walking through the fundamentals of gospel change. It was incredible. Really, really powerful for us when we first read it. And we actually read it together in our old van that we were living. We were filming the other documentary. We were living in a 77 Dodge Tradesman van. And so we were bucketing it from Texas to Florida. And I texted my mom and I said, hey, what's the best book on pornography you've ever read? And she's like, you should read Finally Free or listen to Finally Free. So we put it on our old clackety radio and we're just driving and constantly one of us would reach over, pause it and go, whoa. Yeah, because this and just kind of build off of what Heath was writing in that book. So it's really, really cool. Fast forward, God has been really, really good to me. I kind of become convicted that I want to move into ministry, go to Southern, and I got a chance to get coffee with Tim Challies, which was really, really fun. I was super excited for that. And so, Tim's really, really cool. Sat down with him, had this, just conversation. I asked him about his book, Sexual Detox. And Tim's really funny. He's kind of like, yeah, the book's fine. He's very
He's very low key.
He's very low key, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, yeah, there are better books out there at this point, which I thought was hilarious. But he kind of had this idea, and we talked about it. And he said, his insight was it's really interesting that we tackle a video problem with books, and there might be a space for a gospel-centered teaching resource that tackles the problem of pornography, and it does so in a video form. And he had no idea that I actually work in film, and I've worked in the documentaries and other jobs I've had. He had no clue, which is really providential. And I kind of left that meeting going, huh. So I called John-Michael and I actually said I might have a new project for us. And so we just spent the next month maybe calling probably every other day, just talking about what would it look like? Is it possible? I don't know. Let's think about this. Are we the right people to kind of see if we can collect other people, other biblical counselors who are absolute rock stars together into a teaching resource that walks through the process of change from bondage to sexual sin to freedom in Christ. And God has been mind-blowingly cool in having some people, really great authors, biblical counselors, agree to be part of this documentary. And so we've basically spent the last month filming, and it's really cool. I'm very grateful.
That's actually a good point to emphasize. That's what motivates what makes this unique and motivated this, just starting it, is what does real change look like? I guess that was a big question that I've had posed to me many times and just experienced with talking to other guys, is, yeah, okay, as a Christian, I know this is wrong, but what does it mean to change? Like, I hear talks all the time. Here's the stats. Here's the problem, the morality of why it's wrong, the damage, but then not that much on offering the hope, which is like, I guess I'm just so excited to be involved in that aspect of it, because that's the best part. Like, you have to talk about the stats and you have to talk about why it's wrong. But I think that's got to be the backdrop to the hope and to the real change, especially because that's where like Jesus becomes glorious and big, rather than this, which actually can weirdly glorify and make pornography big, rather than like showing the transforming power of grace, which we're hoping that's undergirding, coming through in the tone and everything with this film.
And ultimately, you know, maybe we're so incredible and we just get thousands of people free from pornography. Great. But if they're not coming to know and love Jesus, there's no point, right?
Yeah.
And if like Christ isn't at the foundation, because there are other methods to get free from pornography that don't involve God. There's secular programs and stuff like that. But if you get free of porn and if you save your soul, if you gain the world, if you gain the world but lose your soul, what's the point, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really excited.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting. Thanks for sharing your story, first of all, and yours as well. Like, it's, obviously that took, like, not just here, but like just in general, that's like, that's a big thing. Like, we've actually had the executive directors, they called, of
Life Renewal.
Of Life Renewal on.
We were just talking to them.
And so they're great, and like, a big part of it is like being able to tell your story. And like, that's obviously like everyone that we have on that has done that is like, you share your, like, it's such an impact that everyone can just see the roadmap that you had, and then like gives them the push to follow the same path. So
totally. And there's something to like you're saying with sharing stories that are powerful, and just like learning how to tell your story. That's something, again, I love about Life Renewal is the 12th step is just giving back. And one of the ways they encourage people to give back is by telling your story. Learn how to do that in a way that, lifts up Christ and makes him glorious in how he's changed you, just so that you don't keep your change just to yourself and things like that. Yeah. So that's actually like one of the pleasures of having a difficult story. Like, I sometimes say I can almost thank God now that I struggled with pornography for so long, which sounds weird.
Yeah.
But God's been able to use pornography in my life to create some of the deepest relationships that I have. Like, my closest friendships were forged in the grounds of fighting pornography, or even just like that honesty of being like, I'm going to open up to you about maybe the hardest thing in my life. And through that, just getting better at vocalizing your own story. Great.
And once you, like, we've talked a bit about this too, right? The foundation for a really good friendship, it's like when I sit across from John-Michael and go like, I know the worst part about you and you know the worst part about me. And we both know that we're loved and accepted by Jesus. So like that just takes so much of the arrogance and pride and hubris and competition out of a friendship, that maybe even subtle ways, when I both know I'm a sinner saved by grace. So are you. And then as a Christian community, I know that you're both sinners saved by grace. And it's like, there's just that connection that Christians can have that is so cool. And slight tangent, I think one of the things that is super cool, like you guys bring us on, but also just in communities, is you have that opportunity to tell your story, right? And say, we've both had struggles with sexual sin in the past. One of the interesting things that this project has done for me is I actually get a lot might be an exaggeration, a few girls message me and tell me their story.
Really?
And it's really fascinating. The reason why I think they message me is that for a lot of girls struggling with pornography, they don't feel like they have a safe place to tell their story or to tell like their addiction to pornography. Because I think sending it to a guy that you don't know very well is not probably the ideal thing, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not putting myself in any way some like the best person to share this stuff with, but they know, at least because, John-Michael and I never shut up about this topic. Yeah. They know that I'm at least a safe place to shoot a message to and say, hey, I just wanted to tell you I've struggled with this and here's kind of a bit of my story. Yeah. All that to say, it's sad actually that something that we're really passionate about with this documentary is we want to speak to women who struggle with pornography just as much as men. And one of the speakers that we have in this film is Ellen Diecast. She's a woman, so she's tackling that head on. Okay. And we've made it very clear that this film is for men and women who struggle with porn. And we're doing a better job in our circles with guys about talking about this more, getting it out there. Yeah. But we owe it to our sisters in Christ to step up and say, hey, a lot of you girls struggle with pornography too. And it's really scary and really shameful to talk about it. And it shouldn't be that way. Not to lessen how bad sin is, but we should have places for people to talk. 100%.
And I guess that's where like things like Life Renewal come in. Actually segues quite well to something I wanted to ask. So like, how do you view this documentary? Like, I guess it's hard to say like there's kind of like a roadmap or like something, but how do you view it? Or what kind of is the structure of it so that it fits into, say, someone's story, like from the point where they're not at all going to talk about it and hiding it from everybody, to the point where they're free, like you guys. Like how do you view this documentary? Is it like kind of the beginning thing, like watch this and then like, here are some steps and then go to Life Renewal, or is it like
that's a good question.
It's like the whole gambit.
Yeah. The phrase we've been using is like, let's begin the conversation. And part of that is we want to introduce the topic and also do more than that, walk some of the fundamentals of change, from bondage to sin to freedom in Christ. But the film does start with the basic premise that you're a Christian and that pornography is wrong. But then basically picks up in the place where you're still caught in your sin. And you don't know what to do. That's where it picks
starting
up.
on the change aspect.
Yeah, exactly. It's starting with the assumption that pornography is wrong.
Yeah.
But that's one thing we hope to do too, is by talking about this, making that obvious.
But you're also, like to Jake's point, you're also raising awareness about the issue from the female side of things, which certainly is not something that's as much talked about as the man.
Yeah, for sure.
Side of things.
Yeah. And there's also like the way we have the documentary, right, it's structured in 6 chapters, walking through that process. Okay. There's something really hopeful about seeing the whole story. So when you kind of go, okay, I might be somewhere in chapter 2 right now, or like, it's not quite that linear, but you might be somewhere here in the journey. But okay, I can see what it would be like to be here, and I could see what it would be like to be there. And then Garrett Kell, he ends chapter 6 really talking about the church, about building a community that like walks along strugglers, like walks with strugglers, like building that body of Christ, and ultimately a body that looks forward to its like final hope in the new kingdom. And so it's super pastoral. It's a really great. He absolutely knocked it out of the park. And so I think there's something that you might be really far back, but if you can see where you could be as a Christian, that's really hopeful. Totally. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It gives you an angle.
Yeah. And then hopefully people go and read the books, because the books are like some of the ones we have, they're way more comprehensive than the documentary could be, right? Because it's comparatively pretty short.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So do you think this would be a resource, obviously, for people struggling with it directly, but also if you know someone who is struggling, if you're a parent or a friend, also beneficial to watch this?
Oh, yeah. Hopefully. It's oriented everything, like even just the way they're talking, it's like you as the struggler. So it's directed to the struggler. But I think like for helpers too, people walking alongside or people who may end up walking alongside someone else, it's important to understand and both like to empathize, to understand what's it like to struggle with this, but also to know what the fundamentals of change look like. And that's one of the aspects, I guess, aside to the primary thing of helping the struggler, is to also help the one walking alongside and to give them a resource if they don't feel able to meet with someone and know what to cover with them as they walk through an addiction, to use this video resource as a way to initiate conversations and to be hitting key things with the person.
So like a good example of that is we have Deepak Reju. He wrote the book. Do we have it there?
rescue plan and rescue skills.
So he and Jonathan Holmes wrote a pair of books that are really, really good. So one of the things he talks about in the chapters is kind of like the philosophy of locking down a phone. So like how to cut off all access. And so he kind of walks you through that process. And so if you're struggling, you would know like this is really helpful for you. But if you're helping someone who's struggling, you're kind of equipped with like, okay, hold up. You can see how someone who is struggling would want to get out of the full lockdown of a phone. And so you can be really like kind of extra alert to make sure that you really are shutting down a device for all it's worth. You know what I mean? So you can kind of take every single thing that's talked about in the film from two different angles, the struggler and the helper, if you will.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. Yeah.
I think we should probably because we've been talking about the outline and the structure of this, but just give people an actual breakdown of how's this put. Yeah, is it good?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So don't give the whole thing away.
Yeah.
Hit them with the highlights, you know.
To be revealed. So basically it's gonna start, it's a documentary, right? So it's a story. So it's gonna start with some sort of montage, kind of really establishing the problem of pornography. That still needs to be done. It's again, like kind of we were talking about before. We don't want to dwell there. Pornography is bad. Hot take, right? Mm-hmm. So Christians generally accept that. And so you want to move on to let's actually deal with the problem properly and then work towards hope. So then chapter 1 was just done by Jeremy Pierre. He's a biblical counselor and a professor at Southern Seminary. He really he walked through the sin and pornography and like kind of the foundational understanding. Like what are we actually dealing with as a problem here? What's going on in your heart when you're dealing with sin? What's sin doing to you? Let's really define our terms, define what we're dealing with, because that's really important before you start to move on to like fixing the problem. Because I think one of the things that the devil loves to do is as long as you keep the problem pretty murky, don't quite define what you're doing, don't really know what you're fighting, you just kind of sin, bad, I'll try more. That's where he loves to work. And as soon as you know this is wrong, here's what it is, and here's what is why, that's when you can start the process of like with the power of grace, actually shutting down some of the sin in your life.
Yeah. And then chapter 2 is on, we've broken these into what we call chapters, but essentially they're just key teaching moments. We'd call them almost like 10-minute TED Talks of counseling with different speakers for, so chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, walking through the film. But then that's all connected with just an overarching story. But why we call it a teaching documentary is predominantly this is teaching, but we're using a story to serve that and to package that together. So we're going to have it in an hour and a half, something like that length film that can be watched, start to finish. But then also that teaching repackaged into 6 episodes for like a discipleship group or in a counseling room or just someone walking alongside someone else to be able to slow down the process and just do bit by bit.
Right. Okay.
What is that targeted to? Those small studies? Is it like a fellowship group, or is it like something? Is it like a group like Life Renewal, or is it like you need to be a bunch of guys, or
could be anybody, like, really, right?
Just like for a council of a church.
Yeah. So it's like the main hope is get this into churches. So when a girl or guy comes to someone in the church, right away, the first thought isn't, oh no, I have no idea how to handle this. First thought is, we have a resource. I think I can walk alongside this person and we'll use this to begin conversations and to initiate the right topics. So this is for the layperson, this is for an elder, this is for a pastor, for the counselor. It's, but especially in churches and in families.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Just because I know people don't always listen to the entire podcast, where will this be available? And if people want to support it, how do they do that?
Your G. So right now we're in the middle of building it phase. Okay. We have a lot of the content filmed already.
Right.
And we're in the middle of the fundraising phase. Okay. So something we didn't talk about is we want everything we make to be at the end to be 100% free forever. Yeah. And so in order to do that, we're crowdfunding it right now. So our budget is, these things are expensive. Our budget is about $65,000. We're using the platform Give, Send, Go. It's a Christian fundraising platform. And so, yeah, we're right in the middle of just the reality of trying to raise the money to to build this thing. No? Well, that's nice. That's very kind of you.
Yeah, I know.
I don't think it does.
On one hand, it's like, oh, a lot of money. And then on the other hand, it's like, well, you're creating a whole like hour and a half thing. That's not that much money.
That much labor.
How long of your life are you taking to do
speakers?
this?
Yeah. About a year, it'll be like bow tied. But like not a whole year of full time.
No.
Summer of full time, part time for the rest of those.
Yeah. So we've been working on it for the last 6 months or so.
But is there a website or something?
Yeah. Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Intothelightdocumentary.com.
We'll link it.
Beauty.
Great.
That's from there. You'll be able to go to the Give, Send, Go link. From there, you'll be able to see the trailer that we built. From there, you'll find the social medias. Like again, it's Into the Light documentary, pretty much everywhere.
Perfect. There's your mid-roll ad.
Right.
And
I appreciate you.
And the fastest way, if you want to give straight, is givesendgo.com/into the light.
Perfect.
Super simple.
Okay. So we were at chapter 2. Let's keep going.
Anyways, break over. Chapter 2 is on. Okay, great.
Oh, look at that. We're doing something right.
So yeah, chapter 2 is on.
Actually, quickly before that, Life Renewal is way better than what we can make. 100%. Life Renewal is so thorough. They really walk through the process and they do it over a year. That's way better than this.
So Into the Light is the gateway drug for Life Renewal. Pardon the pun.
Hopefully, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
If you find this and you find like it's really probing you and you're uncovering sin, bring it into the light, really building your relationship with God, and you want to go to something like Life Renewal, which will take you way deeper. Yeah. Please. That's, I don't know, plug for Life Renewal. They do a phenomenal job.
They do.
Yeah.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2. So it's Christ's love for sinners and God's design for sexuality, and just kind of pairing those two things, coming off of a serious chapter of sin, its consequences, all those things, and then but moving away from the darkness of the heart towards the goodness of God's design for sexuality, and also His love for sinners even in their sin. Just like I always think of this chapter as being summed up in like Ephesians. I always forget the chapter, but like, and yet while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Mm-hmm. Like the moving towards us even as sinners. Mm. So this is really, if you've read Gentle and Lowly, very much like the heart of Christ for sinners, beginning there, and as Christians rooting our identity not in the sin and its consequences, rooting our identity in Christ and the hope and the forgiveness that is there, and letting that be the launch pad for the, I guess, the practical, tangible steps that come out of that.
Okay.
Chapter 3. Chapter 3 was done by Heath Lambert, who wrote Finally Free. Chapter 3 is really like counseling fundamentals. Like, let's talk about some just basic foundational truths of, again, what's happening in your heart when you like desire something. So temptation, like walking through what is temptation? What is it doing to you? How is it different from actual sin? What are practical strategies that you can think through to stop yourself walking down that road? He has an analogy where he talks about a dandelion with the fruit, the root, and the shoot, with the fruit being the actual sin, the root being the way you're thinking about it, but then the shoot being the way you think about it, and the root is like the underlying desires that you have. So really going deeper into your heart and how you can really understand yourself so you can better fight sin.
Yeah. And also getting into how do you respond just in a very practical sense, both to temptation before, let's say acting out or choosing to sin, and then how do you react before, and then also how do you react afterwards? And just, I love that because it's so tangible. It's showing like, how do you practically begin tackling something that seems so huge and something so, I guess, pervasive because of the habits built.
Yeah.
And then also learning how to bring other people into that with community and accountability, which like switches over to chapter 4. Chapter 3 and chapter 4 are kind of like, they're very interwoven together. So chapter 4 was taken by Deepak Raju, who wrote Rescue Plan and Rescue Skills. And he just gets into the radical, practical measures of how do you cut off access, and just, viewing it like, if you walk into a hospital with an open wound, you're not going to be getting asked like, oh, so like, what are your symptoms? What are some things you need? Are you feeling okay? It's like the first thing they do is they take you in and they stitch up the like gaping, bleeding wound so that they can have the healing take place. And he uses that analogy to just say like, when you're dealing with pornography, it's not legalism to say we have to start by cutting off access. And just as a practical step to take, cutting off total access so that if someone he used the analogy, like if someone put a gun to my head right now, I could not find pornography on my phone, period. As simple as that. That is the point. He says, I have to get the people who come to me for counseling too, in order to have the space for them to heal and to grow in their love for the Lord. Otherwise, it's just, you are setting yourself up to fail because you're addicted. You will go back to it in a moment of weakness or when there's a trigger or something like that. So very, very practical with that chapter.
Yeah.
Can you get past that without living like an absolute Luddite for like ever? Or is there like more steps out?
I was going to say that sounds healthy either way. Not having the internet all the time would probably be good for somebody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe.
Well, I'm maybe I'm the odd man out. I actually like the internet a lot. It's kind of cool.
Oh no.
Yeah. No, but what is it? So it's interesting, right? So one of the other things we're doing with this whole thing, right? We talked about, we've got the documentary, 6-episode series. We're also launching a podcast with it. And the podcast is we've recorded an hour and a half sometimes with each of the people we recorded with. And so the podcast is a place where we can like kind of ask them the questions that we feel haven't gotten answered.
Deep dive.
Exactly.
Yep,
exactly. So that's exactly one of the questions that we asked. Who did we end up asking it to? Was it Heath?
Yep.
It's when can you start introducing some like livable things back? Yeah. Like you've watched pornography, you're hooked.
Yeah. Let's say like social media would be a trigger for a lot of people.
For sure. So at what point in your healing, what point in like when you've put sin away, can you go, I can have Instagram back?
Yeah.
And he gave a really thoughtful like response to that. A large part of it being, you're not necessarily the best person to make that choice. So having good community in your life for to say, hey brother, it's been 2 months since you last fell into pornography. You're displaying solid devotional habits. You're really walking with the Lord. I can see that in your life. If you enjoy Instagram, I think it's reasonable you can have it back. Let's see how that goes. Let's keep me very accountable for the next 2 weeks. Yeah. If you need to have the strength and responsibility to go, no, too much of a trigger. I'm out. Right? Maybe you have it for a week and you go, this is not healthy. You can kill it, or maybe you go, actually, this is fine. I have no temptation, or whatever that looks like, right? Yep. So other people in your life can give you an opportunity to have a better perspective on that.
And like just speaking for myself, there's a lot of things that I cut out, and there's a couple things I've reintroduced back. And I never had to go so radical as like getting to a flip phone. And actually that may have been a good thing to do. I really respect people who do that. Yeah. But so for myself, I've actually kept most of the stuff that I put in place. And just because I know I would so much rather live with that inconvenience than deal with the temptation or the potential relapse. Just even social media. It's like, okay, that's a bummer. It's more inconvenient in other ways. But just as a long-term habit, I don't anticipate having social media on my phone very much.
I mean, if you have to email people, is it the end of the world?
Yeah. Well, that's a good example. Like I didn't have email on my phone for a year. It's like such a pain. Like,
because of you counted email social media.
Just for me, that was a potential way that I like completely locked down. It was a very dumb phone by the time when you delete all the stuff. So that was one thing I did reintroduce back and has been fine.
Okay.
But that's like one of the things that was like, no, this is not worth the potential temptation here. Like nothing is really. That's the point.
Fair enough. Yeah.
It's hard until that's exactly what Jesus meant by cutting off arm and a leg, or arm and an eye. Like it's just, that's the point, is to cut off access to sin. It is not worth it. So, and I appreciate what Deepak said in his chapter 2. Many people go, 50, 70, 80% of the way. But there's that last 20 or 30% is just, you don't want to cut that out. That's the place you keep going back to and falling, because there's something that you value slightly more, whether it's your convenience or social media or whatever it is, more than getting rid of the sin. And that will continue to kill you. So just putting that out there to people listening, cut off total access. You have to be in there. So
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. No, it was just a practical follow-up question I had. So
yeah,
what was
100%.
that? Chapter 3, 4?
somewhere in the
4.
mix. Yeah. Keep it rolling.
Yeah, chapter 5 was taken by Ellen Dykas, and chapter 5, between 5 and 6 are my favorite chapters. 5 is all about how do you run an endurance race, because most people getting out of pornography are going to be in the place of you're not like chaos falling into sin like you were before. You've got a handle. You've got some good measures in place. Maybe you have solid accountability, but you're setting yourself up for a slog for some months of slowly battling sin step by step, measure by measure, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 5 steps forward, 2 steps. Like it's going to be work. It's going to be hard. Pornography is extremely addicting, and sin, the devil doesn't like to give up his ground easily. So what does it look like to preach the gospel to yourself during the months of sometimes very difficult time it takes to get out of patterns of sin? And so she just gave a really hopeful kind of summary of the last 4 chapters and a really hopeful like encouragement to people who are struggling to keep at it, and some kind of good tactics and tips for kind of maintaining hope through the process of battling your way out of pornography.
I think a lot of people are there actually in chapter 5, where like, I guess, that's probably my favorite chapter too, because it's meeting people who are starting to feel jaded, who are struggling to believe that God can change them and that it's even possible to not be caught in pornography for the rest of their life. And it picks up there and is just very pastoral. It's honest about the fact that it is so rare for someone to just say, okay, I'm going to take pornography seriously, cut it off, and forever after they were like perfect and they never looked at it again.
Mm-hmm.
So that is not anybody's story that I know, actually. I don't know anybody's story who had that happen. And it would be really nice if God worked that way, but it just frankly doesn't. And
He can.
That's true. It's like, that is not beyond the Lord's power. It's just typically that is not how it works. And we have to be honest with that, and not expect people to change instantly, and yet pick up with the fact that your inadequacies, your failures does not mean that God does not meet you there, and that God is not able or willing to change you. So often I see that be the first thing, is being jaded towards God.
Yeah. No, it's a good observation. I bet a lot of people are there in that process. Any particular tips that stood out for you of those ones that you mentioned she provided?
Your identity is not your track record.
Yes.
You are not your success last week, your success yesterday, the pattern of sin. Even if you do really well, that's still not your identity. Your identity has to be as a Christian, as a loved, cherished child of God, because that's where you find your root in fighting in the first place. And it sometimes becomes easy to let go of that, because once you start doing well for a few weeks, you go, yeah, look at me, I'm doing it. I got this.
Little works righteousness.
Yeah. Right. And then you fall, and then the devil goes, wham.
Yeah,
Gotcha. Sorry for the mics on that one, but you know what I mean?
You made your point. Yeah.
So the point is you have God loves you, and he'll keep loving you regardless of your opinion of yourself, which is going to go up and down through this fight. But just really remembering and meditating on who you are as a Christian is such a powerful way to fight the shame and the pride that can come with this kind of thing.
And part of chapter 5 is actually rehearsing some of those key things that already watched in chapters 1 through 4, of like understanding, okay, what are the consequences of sin? Where is my identity? Like, Christ moves towards me. I have to remind myself that it's not about me being perfect and then being okay to go to God, and that be identifying my relationship. Have I been getting lax with cutting off access? Have I left myself open to temptation? Am I being honest with my accountability? It's just going back over all those things we've already kind of covered in those pre-chapters, but re-preaching them back to yourself. And it's a really, I think she did a great job of making it hopeful and not depressing, and meeting people honestly where they're at. Which is why I'm just so pumped about that chapter.
Yeah, I'm like, the more I hear this, the more I'm excited for the video part of this, like, or it being not a book, because well, so but I'm not a reader, but like even like you're not going to go read a book 5 times. Like you might if you're really committed, but like seems like something like you can, like you guys mentioned, like just listening to an audiobook.
Yeah.
But if you can continually remind yourself of the hope, like go and like just watch that chapter and just be like, okay, like I'm good again. I'm good again. Like as long as like because that's a big step, like to like what you said, like you got to remind yourself that you're of who you are and get past it. It's like getting past it every day, not just okay, I'm good to go. Right?
Yeah. One thing we do in like the accountability group I'm part of is after every week, we just say in unison, like whether we had a good week or a bad week, I'm forgiven, I'm saved by Christ. And it's just a simple way that as an accountability group, we're reminding ourselves like our identity is not in our track record. That's just huge. Our identity is like we are forgiven, we're saved by Christ and children of God. That is we live the Romans 8 life. That's what we strive to. So it's such a great thing to have undergirding everything.
All right, hit us with 6. And then I got a question.
Okay. Yeah. So chapter 6, this is one actually that we had written a few different things, and then he ended up Garrett Kell, took it in like a slightly different direction, but just also talking about community in the church. What does it mean to be a Christian struggling with sin and sins more than just pornography, like just being a sinner in a community, and how do you do that well? And also how ultimately our hope is in a new creation, how just the hope that we have is so much more than just now. It is so good. I don't know if you have thoughts on chapter 6 too.
It was just so pastoral and hopeful, which I just love it. It was really resounding, especially because he spent a bit of time talking about heaven and like and that's a really, something it can be hard, but that's a really beautiful thing to contemplate. Like one day, all of this sin, that darkness, like what you did last night, all of that's going to be gone if you're a Christian. How cool is that?
Yeah.
How cool is that? And it's going to be a while before that happens. Most of us are going to live here for a fair bit longer, but eventually God's going to do away with this sin nature that we have. And that's going to be incredible. And then there's going to be a long, long, long time of being porn free after that for good. And you can never go back.
Oh, that like, even just speaking as someone who's still like, I just think of myself as an addict in remission. Like I think, and try to treat myself in that way. Wow. That is like such a freeing thought to be like, I never have to worry about being tempted, leaving myself in a bad position and setting myself up to fail in a way like that. And the fact that I won't have to shed another tear, like an angry tear, a frustrated tear, a tear of despair. Like, and for the people listening, like, I'm sure there are so many people listening to this right now who have wept over their sin and also are angry at themselves, hate themselves for this. And it's just, that is what we want to lift up, is there is hope beyond this, where there are no tears anymore, and where you will no longer have to be caught and stuck in pornography and forever.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's amazing to see, like, cause we like to dwell on like what we're doing wrong, and then like what we could be doing right. And then like what's pushing us to the grace, but it's good to look at from the other way. Like what's pulling us from the other side? Like, what is the glory that, we're going to experience? So, anyways, I'll see if I can formulate this weekly form thought into a question. So I feel like pornography is a bit different than other addictions in that, like, say like alcohol or drugs or something like that is, it's not like a necessary part of life, but like the problem with pornography is that it ties to our sexuality and then also into like marriage. So a lot of times, like with your story, John-Michael, like you start young, and then when you get married, like that track record doesn't just like follow you, but it follows like your family. And that's like, so how, like, not just like be like, well, your film didn't cover this, but like, is that something that you guys address, that like, how do you recover to a point where you are now like can go back to like a healthy, like biblical form of or expression of sexuality. Because it's like, if you recover from alcohol, you just recover from alcohol. You just like, you do the detox, you get off it. I mean, it's obviously nearly impossible.
Right.
But once you're there, you don't put yourself in a situation where you can go back. You don't, but you don't need to then, share a drink with somebody down the road.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So when we were beginning this whole process, we had to talk about what are we going to cover and what are we not going to cover.
That was on the list of not covered.
Dude, it's so painful. There's so many incredible topics we would love to cover.
But the caveat is, so to be clear, that's not a major thing that we're talking about in the film. And we hope that, there's a lot of healing just through the general principles. Yeah. But also that does come up in the podcast at different points. Like we got honest questions. We did an anonymous survey just for people on Instagram and stuff. So then we use those to kind of amalgamate together and ask questions to the speakers. And so some of those questions are tackled in the podcast, but if I could just like plug people into a really good book that directly talks about that. Yep. Curtis Solomon's Redeem Your Marriage, Hope for Husbands Who Have Been Hurt Through or Who Hurt Through Pornography. And then his wife did a mirror book, except for wives who have been hurt by pornography. So just for people watching this,
we'll
really good book.
Link the whole stack.
You're a gem.
That's part of this too. Like, we're doing a video resource because people aren't readers, but we're really hoping we can plug people into books too.
Do you guys have like an Amazon discount code?
Go through this link.
It's a light 20 for 20.
We're actually a huge bank here.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, like, the documentary is going to be hour and 20 minutes, right? In audio time, audio translated to page time, that's like maybe 70 pages, right? So like I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I've got that conversion pretty good. 70 pages is not a lot of pages, right? Even like a book like Finally Free here, it's a very small book and it's 160 pages, so twice the length of what we could cover in the documentary.
Yeah.
People need to read these books. They're so good and they're so transforming and they're full of so much practical gospel truth that we just can't quite cover in the documentary. So we're really hoping that like John-Michael said, this starts the conversation, but we hope people pick up, Pure in Heart, Randy Alcorn's book, Sexual Sanity for Women, Ellen's book, like give them a read. They're really, really good.
Honestly, these are just the tip of the iceberg too. Like that's part of it. We are not speaking in this. We're bringing in the people who've got, they spend their lives counseling and writing and we're thrilled to have them. We're trying to like read as much as we possibly can too. So in the backdrop as, putting things together, editing, we can be honoring their teaching by making that decision of what do you keep in, what do you not, because you can't keep everything.
And asking thoughtful questions in the podcast. So if we've read 10, 15, 20 books on this subject beforehand, we can, as clearly as we can, again, respecting their time, their expertise, we can ask them really thoughtful questions so that they're giving the best answers they possibly can.
And plug, that's the other thing. There's lots of books out there, like being kind of not all of them are good.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to do some of that sifting, because one bad book can do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
And we've seen that with people where they said, I read this thing like that, and it was actually that incited me to lust, or those practical steps were extremely legalistic and did not teach me how to think well with this. Mm-hmm. So we're pumped to give the speakers a platform and then plug them into what we think are really good books on the topic that are really helpful. Mm. So we've espoused their books well. We got our commission.
Yeah, we really love books, in case you guys can't.
Yeah.
Can't see.
That's good.
We love people who love books, so we can talk to them about the books.
Yeah. There's so much.
That's okay. We'll link all the Audible books.
Oh, bless your heart.
Yeah. There you go. No, that's cool. Okay. I mean, I did want to talk about the nitty gritty a bit, but it's probably not as important just because it's kind of interesting to see, how the cookie crumbles and how you guys make that. But we mentioned earlier in the podcast, like women, this being an issue for women too. Is that any particular focus throughout the documentary at all? Or just kind of like you're raising awareness in the fact that like it's mentioned throughout, like this is like a problem for both sexes?
Yeah. Particular, no. In so much as we just want to make it very clear, men, women, both struggle with pornography. There are differences, and you can, spend a lot of time with some sociologists and psychologists arguing about the differences.
Mm-hmm.
They're there, but it doesn't really matter. So say 40% of women struggle with pornography and 60% of men, or whatever the breakdown is, you still have a massive portion of women who struggle with pornography. And also, porn isn't the only version of sexual sin. Like erotica, fantasy, like there can be fiction that's every bit as bad. And so the differences don't matter per se. What does matter is like there are a ton of women in our churches who are really struggling and hurting. And there's a ton of men too. But the women have the extra struggle of being very unsure who they can talk to and who they can open up, and the accountability. And when we don't have those conversations, then a lot of women think that they're that much worse off than the average. Like, okay, if no girls are talking about this, I must be a freak. Like I must be so sinful. I don't even have a category for how bad I might be.
Yeah.
And the reality is like, no, you just don't realize that, 2 aisles down, there's another girl who's struggling with a lot of the same things,
Yep.
but you guys just don't know. And I'm saying this because like I've had girls like talk to me about this and be like, I'm so scared to tell anyone.
Yeah.
And so yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's bad enough as a guy.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, there's actually, I'm trying to remember which book it's from. Helen Thorne. What's the name of her book again? In her book, she mentions that like the shame levels, I forget how they did the study, but like the shame levels for women were like twice or 3 times as much as guys bring it out. So like, yeah, I know what it's like to be terrified of telling people about that. I can't even imagine having that cripplingly like multiplied.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is like just a slight tangent. One of the podcasts we did was kind of just had a bit of a focus on where pornography and mental health meet. Just something that we were interested in because of situations like this, where if you've been struggling for a really long time, and you keep trying to get out and you know it's wrong, there's this self-hate loop that builds with pornography. Or if you think you are weird, like I am the only person, I cannot believe how bad I am. There's that loop that can begin. So yeah, there's a connection there. And that was with, I think, Jeremy Pierre. Is a really good podcast with him too on that topic. So I'm actually, the podcast is, we hope, a hidden gem of this total project, just to be another practical resource for people to go back to, listen, hopefully re-listen, and just take things from.
Is that going to be an ongoing thing, or that's just like a standalone, like 6-part podcast, wherever it would be?
To be determined.
To be determined.
Yeah.
I mean, if
if it pops off,
hot take, we're all busy, right? Yeah. But like we're busy, everyone's busy. But if we, and it's a funding thing too, right? If we get just that little bit more funding, that might allow us to open up some more hours to pursue more people to do podcasts with. So
that's actually true for a lot of things. Like we'd like to do discussion questions, and maybe like a workbook or something, and have speakers help us write that and create that.
Yeah.
Again, that kind of comes down to how much money can we raise? And if we can, I think that's another really practical thing to make this even more helpful, even more practical for people.
Yeah. This might be a reworking of Tyler's question, but I wonder if you guys tackled this a bit, whereas like basically with your 2 stories, both very common. Actually, yours less common, definitely, Jake, but John-Michael's very common. Most guys have seen pornography. Like I've seen it. It's definitely a thing. Most guys have.
Yeah.
And even if the guys who haven't, everyone's still masturbated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I don't know a single guy who hasn't.
Yeah.
At all.
Same. And we've talked about it a lot.
And women too. Exactly. It is.
Oh, and women too. Probably not to the same extent, but certainly a substantial portion. All right. So do you guys looking to get, or have you figured out a way to get to like the heart of the issue, which is probably the way we view sexuality? Like, what are we, like, I don't know if this has historically always been the case, or like, do we just get married later in life and people just have to wait longer? It's just a brutal thing. Like once you get into it, which everyone's like, oh, you hit puberty, you started young, blah, blah, blah.
So I'm reading a book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self by Carl Trueman.
That's a great book.
Great book.
That's a great
right?
book.
So he gets at like maybe 10% of that question and takes a whole book to do it. And he traces, Marx and Freud and Darwin, just the whole history of thought and how we are more from a cultural point of view with understanding sexuality and politics. there's part of it, but like, gosh, I'm not smart enough to answer that question, dude.
No, I know. It's just, I'm wondering if you guys have found any kernels of information on that. Because that's, again, like for people, and maybe if there's older people listening too, if they could, like, if they have the money and they wanted to fund you guys to go look into this question, it would be an interesting one to discover.
So maybe here's one side of this. One of the things that I read for this project that no one should read is I read a biography of a porn star who's an active porn star. Dude is horrifying. It was like literally, yeah, man, it was nasty. It was a depressing read. And one of the things I just really want to understand the industry. And again, no one should read this book. Like, I'm dead serious about this. But it was helpful for me to get into the headspace of what's it like on the other side of the camera, and like what's it like working in the industry, and what's it like to be a part of producing the content that is damaging so many people's lives in our community and in the world. Yeah. And one of the things that goes into is the porn industry is an industry that is colossal. There's so much money in it. It's almost incomprehensible. And whenever you have that much money, you're going to have thousands and thousands of absolute geniuses who are doing nothing more than trying to tailor this content so it is the most addictive, the most pervasive content you can possibly imagine, because there's so much money involved. Mm-hmm. So the industry behind this, and I'd say the spiritual forces behind it, as far as I'm concerned, are all bent on hooking as many people as possible for as long as possible. And so when you realize kind of the scale of the problem of pornography, then you start to kind of go, okay, I can kind of see why this is a big issue, right? Oh, yeah. There's a lot of money involved here. There's a lot of, and then I'm kind of getting out of my depth. I don't know the history of pornography as well as maybe other people do, but that's, I think, maybe one of it, part of the reason too. This is not just like, here's pornography and here's other things you can do. Some people do this, some people don't do this. It's like, there's a whole industry trying to grab your attention. And that shouldn't be like a fear mongering thing. Like, they're coming for your kids. No, but they kind of are, you know what I mean?
100%.
Well, but that's kind of like, getting back to what Lucas was asking. Like, it's kind of it's almost like we've been down this road, right? Like in our parents and our grandparents, like they just didn't have the same access. Yeah, for sure. But that industry wasn't as developed either. Although I'm sure there was like the Hugh Hefners of the world who were trying to think and get into this. Yeah. But like
Kinsey. Yeah.
Sure, I don't know.
Yeah.
But but like now it's so pervasive. It's such a large industry but also like the access to it is like, it's unbelievable. So now like they have so many more tools, but then we've also, our culture shifted to more accepting and more like they're pushing this narrative, right? So we've moved from where this was like a taboo thing that was hard to get into to being like, there's almost no way you can't get into it.
Yeah.
And there's people actively trying to get your kids into it and you into it.
Yeah.
So like, how do you, moving forward, how do we tackle this? Like, it's good to get.
How do we get out of survival mindset is, I think.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, we can cut ourselves off, but how do we get to a point where like, I'm thinking about my kids. Like I got my oldest is 3. So like, he knows how to work YouTube already on our TV.
Yeah.
But that's not like, that's not a problem unless I have Blue's Clues on.
Yeah.
But it's really getting worse and worse. But they have like I don't know.
I think John-Michael and I can probably give a few thoughts, but I think the first thing is we're not experts on this. You know what I mean?
Especially this aspect.
Because a lot of smart people are trying to think about this very, very hard and writing about it and stuff like that. So, we're a couple of guys. We've been reading nonstop on this for like 8 months, but with only so much. The biggest thing for like on the parent side of things is just like be aware, right? Really think, like, because I think just really thinking about it for a while is actually a good first step. He's going, okay, hold up. What devices do I have in my house? There's a good start. How are they getting their internet? What's stopping them from getting porn? Okay, you kind of you can trace the route. Like, okay, the internet's hitting my house. How? Okay, through our normal internet connection and through mobile data. Okay, there's 2 entrance points there. There's a router involved. Okay, that's another point of connection. And there's devices for almost every step of the way, right? So Disney Circle is a device that, I hope I don't botch this. I believe it takes the place of your router or becomes the router modem situation. And then it can filter and monitor pornography and explicit content at that point before it ever hits your phone. If you're thinking of data like a stream kind of coming through, it stops it right there. And
This is a Disney product?
Yeah, it's called Disney Circle. It's pretty cool. So we have one or had one at our house for a while.
Yeah, my parents had one.
Yeah, and so you can do a lot of other stuff. You can literally nuke the Wi-Fi at like 9:00 at night if you want to, and just no one
sucks
can.
if you like to play video
Oh, bro,
games.
Every kid hates Disney
I never
Circle.
even heard of that until you told me that one.
Yeah, my parents did that. My brothers. Yeah.
And then you can double up, and then you can have accountability software on your phone, and then there's different ways that can look like. So you can have software that's primarily monitoring based. So if it sees stuff, it'll notify an accountability partner, or you can have stuff that's primarily blocking based, which it'll stop it from ever coming up, or both. And then you can have, if you have older kids, you can have accountability partner systems in place, which I think is getting to the most effective, which is groups of people who you're actively accountable with. You're building community, you're confessing your sin, and you can do all of these things. And so hopefully, even when you're tempted, you don't even have, like kind of Garrett Kell says, he used one with that quote, if you put a gun to my head, I can't find porn on my phone. So no matter how tempted he is, if he's by himself and he's got his phone, he's kind of good, Yeah. And that's not the end of the conversation, but at least that could help him through a really rough period, right?
Yeah.
To the point of, I guess parents thinking about it with their kids. How do we be proactive? I resonate with the challenge of going so far as to be like, okay, my kid can't have a phone. Like, arguably, that's the best way you could try as a parent to keep your kid for a while. Except I just think that's not going to last. The reality is kids show each other porn at school. There are weird uncles. You can find it. Like, I've had friends just be doing construction work and find it in the wall. Like, porn is out there all over the place in random places that you don't realize. So the best strategy,
calendars.
Literally.
We literally have suppliers. You go in there and they have like the 1999 like calendars everywhere.
99. I think it was like a 68 or something.
Yeah.
It's just like, man, it's everywhere.
But like,
that's traumatic for a 9-year-old.
Oh yeah, if you're a young
right?
kid,
Like at this
point,
at our age, it's like, frick, you just kind of avert your eyes and keep walking.
You just laugh at these people.
Yeah, right. It's like, that's so sad. But for someone who's 9, 10, whatever, first job, helping out their dad somewhere, going on a trip, whatever, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
But the big thing is, like, you want your kids to want to not actively go after it. And like, yeah, again, like you were saying, Jake, not going to try to be like, oh, here is the solution or whatever. But I do think there is, I guess, maybe an unhelpful tendency to be like, in protecting my kids, I'm just going to do my absolute best while they're under my roof to just keep them away from it.
Yeah.
Like, what I want for my kids is that they're competent and I guess love the Lord and understand the danger so much that they want to run away from it. And if that doesn't begin in the home, I'm just hoping and trust and like essentially just on hope that as soon as they move out from underneath my roof, they'll suddenly have self-control. So again, this can look so many different ways, but self-control and teaching your kids that means giving them a phone at some point, because as soon as they move out, they're going to get one. So it's every house is going to look different, but I do feel passionate about just completely cutting off internet from your kids is not a good solution, because it's a deep dive off the other end as soon as they get out of the house.
It seems like it's a losing battle, especially for parents. Like to that point, like when I grew up without a TV we had a TV. We had just the antenna, you roped around the house so you could watch hockey on Saturday night. But there was no, like, we didn't really watch TV. Like, we didn't know any of the shows growing up or anything like that.
Right.
When I hit university, I had a laptop and I just watched TV all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I just never had TV. I was like, oh, dude, you can just watch TV. Like, you can just watch TV.
Right.
So, I mean, like, whatever. I still got out and did stuff, but yeah, I was like,
It's kind of like asking the question, what's the ideal? Is the ideal my child's to be ignorant and innocent, or is the ideal for my child to be I guess intentional and capable? Is it just like I want my kid to be capable of saying no to porn rather than always so protected from porn that they just can't even access it?
Know what the risk is, but also hopefully they don't learn the hard way.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's like that with anything else. Like
But
drinking,
man,
drugs.
easier said than done. Though.
Exactly. We're throwing out ideals here, but
and also like
parents, so.
It's getting more pervasive and more demented in the world too. Like it's everywhere. Like I was just like
it's in memes.
Daily Wire just put out things on what is a woman. That's just
which is a great documentary.
Which is a great documentary too.
Is that Matt Walsh?
Yeah, I watched it last night. It's just gold.
But yeah, there's things like whatever. I just saw there was like a kids drag show or something crazy stuff in the States. Like what? Like this, like you can't even fathom what's coming down the pipe for my young kid, right? So
yeah.
But I think what at least for us is cool is there's specifics and there's a lot of value in really thinking through these issues, but the answers don't change that much. The answers were just as relevant 2,000 years ago as they are now. And that is like you're the person and work of Jesus and the relationship that you have with him and growing in holiness. And you can only do that if you have the Holy Spirit in you, actually changing you, working the fruits of the Spirit in you. That starts in a simple way when you're young, but like that's still the answer. And that's not to say don't be very rigorous and thoughtful as you're like kind of examining the cultural issues. Like read a bunch of books on this stuff. It will be helpful, but train up a child in the way he should go. Right. And man, that's so easier said than done. That's such a man, like, especially as like a young single guy, that's super great thing for me to tell into a mic to a bunch of parents listening.
Well, I
get
like
that.
You're telling like to John-Michael's parents. Like he's bragging about them, and then like what are you supposed to do?
It's true, right?
Like,
and and I can understand that it would seem daunting and scary.
That's what I was trying to get at earlier. Like, I wonder. You guys probably don't know the answer. I don't know the answer.
I don't know
but
the
like,
answer.
did people like, let's say 100 years ago, like, okay, let's say today, the rates of masturbation among teenage boys, 99.99999%.
Sure. Yeah.
Basically 100.
Yeah.
Was that the case 100 years ago? Or were they just like, they didn't even know, they were so ignorant and they got married? They're like, oh, what are we doing here? Okay.
ask Martin Luther.
This is how we make kids. Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like I'm just, I would love to like get an older person on.
Yeah.
Maybe not like 100, but like, what was it like?
If you can get
like
100-year-old
even in the
person on.
60s or something? I don't know. Like,
The 60s were mad.
yeah, I know. But like, there was more
Woodstock,
before the
man.
internet. Like now we all exist in the same Western
Sure.
culture.
Yeah.
But there were certainly times pre-internet where it was a very much like, this was a rural, isolated area. This is how they've done things for the last 1900 years. Like that didn't change much.
I think
You want Amish guy on.
Yeah.
I don't want Amish. I'm just curious, like what has been like. I'm sure it's always been hypocritical and
Sure.
whatever.
I don't know if I can answer that really.
No, I know. I'm just postulating.
I know.
Yeah,
It'd be nice, man. Like
The only period of history that I feel like I've studied at all is like ancient history around like the Roman and Greek period. Their sexuality
they were
was
deviant dogs.
extraordinarily messed up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I don't know any other period of history very well at all. All I know is the one time studied kind of in depth on something is like, wow, they are just as messed up with their sexuality, just as perverted.
Oh,
Sodom and Gomorrah
I
was
was
like
about to say the Babylon Bee had a
can you-
great headline on that. The other
Yeah.
day.
Can you imagine the nightmare that place was?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
The story about Lot and his daughters. Yeah.
yeah, like that's just like
Horrifying.
You can't even imagine that happening now. And
Yeah.
like I can't imagine a culture that's more sexualized than ours. But clearly they
fair.
were pulling it off.
Yeah. No, it's true.
And they didn't have the internet,
yeah.
as
True.
far as we know.
Yeah. Maybe Egypt.
It descends into absolute chaos.
Anyways, so okay.
So anything else you guys want to mention?
Yeah, while you're here. Yeah, I mean, I'm out of question.
wanna-
Let's-
you
well, we
wanna
can go
get
to the
into, like,
nitty gritty.
the-
I don't know how much people care about that. Maybe we should plug again where this thing's at.
Well, yeah, I'd love to talk about the crowdfunding
Yeah,
side of
that
things.
would be good.
Well, okay, so $65,000, not that much money. Because you guys are
Explain how
spending
that's
your
getting
whole
used.
year on this. I can't believe you're only getting paid nothing.
Yeah, it's not quite nothing, but it's getting
Close.
close. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing, is just paying hourly wages for this kind of thing. Cause we're just, two dudes working on this thing. We actually owned a lot of equipment and stuff from past things. We bought a few more things. The budget is actually very simple. We went on a couple film trips, and at $65,000, it'd be nice to raise more than that, but that will produce these three different unique things: long film, episodes, and podcast. And it will pay Jake and I for the summer. So as of now, what is different about how we did this is we just footed the bill for all of this. And so far we've just donated all our time, trusting that God will provide the funding. So
you're in recovery mode already.
We're in recovery
I
mode.
think
it's a very scary thing.
That's a good business model.
I think we spent 10 grand in 2 weeks on like, cause we did in a 2 week period, we bought a lot of gear, booked a lot of the Airbnbs, set up a lot of we did a lot of spending in 1 week. And that's,
well, it shows how committed you are to it.
Yeah.
How important you think it is, which is, well justified. So
yeah. And the big thing to emphasize here is like, we trust, like God has opened doors in unique ways. So we trust that he'll provide here again. I have no problem asking people for money. It's not fun to talk about sexuality with people generally. It's not fun to ask for money. And yet, like on this topic, I am excited to ask people to invest into this because you can offer practical hope for people caught in porn. If you are caught in porn, you can help support and create a project that maybe, we pray life transforming for you. Something that is deeply helpful for you to see Christ and to help him transform your life. And we need you to support this. So frankly, please go to givesendgo.com/into-the-light and support this because we need it.
I don't know if you guys want to end on this story or keep going. We'll talk as long as you want. I was out for a meal with a buddy of mine last week, and he was talking to me, and he just started telling me the story. He knows me pretty well, so he knows this project. And he said, so he's like, I have a little sister, right? So he's his little sister, and his little sister is interested in a guy, right? His little sister's in high school. So my friend went on TikTok, looked up this guy, and looked at the types of people that this guy was following. All of it was softcore pornography. So my friend then goes to his little sister and says, like, hey, sis, don't go down this road. Don't be interested in this guy. Her response was, all the guys in my class watch pornography. Who really cares? She goes to one of our Christian schools in the area. That's the level of problem that this is. And I don't want to do the fear-mongering thing. It's not cool. But man, there's so many hurting people in our communities who are just trapped in pornography. They really struggle to feel that God has any love for them. And God has put us in a really, really cool, really privileged place to be able to create a resource that we hope can get people out of pornography, but also just get people to know and love Jesus. And we're so thrilled about that.
That's why I share my story. That is for me when Jesus became real, when I could say I love the Lord in truth because I stopped choosing to love pornography more than Jesus. So yeah, I guess that's at the heart of it. Is like, we are hoping that through this, people even become Christians and for the first time begin to enjoy him and love him and see him as beautiful. And that was true for me. I've seen that be true for other guys as they take on pornography. And we hope that in many women and men's lives that is true through this. So.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I could talk to you guys because you guys are awesome for hours and hours, but man, that's like about as good a place as you could ever ask to end. So
thanks for having us on, guys. We really appreciate
Thanks
it.
so much.
No problem. Wonderful.
And go to givesendgo/into-the-light. Right? There you go.
You got it.
I got it. And with that, you get 100% free subscription to Real Talk.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah.
And
I'm just so excited for you guys.
Blessed by the work and excited to see the documentary and the resources that come about it.
Yeah.
And hopefully you guys have funding coming out your ears that you can continue this work on.
Coming out the yang yang. All right. Cool. This has been Real Talk. Hopefully it leads to real change. We'll catch you folks next time. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Real Talk. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen or watch the show. If you want to send us your feedback, and we'd love to hear it, please email us at reformedrealtalk@gmail.com. If you want to find us online or social media, we got a lot of great content there. Just search Reformed Real Talk and we should come right up. This show is created and produced by myself, Lucas Holtfluer, and Tyler Vanderwood. And our wonderful podcast manager who does all the editing is Mariah Tamiga. So we're really thankful for her contribution to the show as well. That's all for now, folks. Thanks for watching or listening, and we'll catch you next time.